Welcome back to the Uncharted Leader. Well, today I have some fabulous news. I think a topic that I think all of you are going to be thoroughly interested in, and we're going to dig a bit deeper into the area of recruitment. And given the current climate, I think this is a conversation I think all of us are very interested in, especially given the uncertainty for many who are kind of currently dealing with being out of employment, looking for employment. And some curious perspective about this, actually, because, here we are, it's now a couple of months into the pandemic, and whilst there is a lid on the employment market, I think we're starting to see a little bit of change happening in that area, and certainly from the conversations I've been having with the gentleman, Steve Grace, who has joined me today. He's the founder of and CEO of the Nudge Group. He's an expert and specialist in the area of recruitment, working mostly with founders and startups. Steve's, interestingly, he's been hit by the current pandemic, but has now started to come out the other side and is starting to see a significant amount of growth. But the reason I've actually asked Steve to join me in particular today is because there's something quite unique about Steve. Steve has a passion for storytelling and being able to get an organisation to focus in on their story as a way to enhance people's experience as they onboard with an organisation. But the other thing I like about Steve, he doesn't like to mess about. He likes to make things happen, and he also likes to do things differently, which is a good fit for the Uncharted Leader. So thanks for joining me, Steve.
My pleasure.
Look, there's so much we want to talk about today. Specifically, two things I am interested in is your perspective about storytelling and the importance of storytelling in the onboarding experience, and then we might even call it what you have said about what the nudge is and giving people the nudge experience. Can you start with telling us a bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think in terms of the storytelling and the onboarding experience, particularly with the people that I work with, we've spoken about this before, that corporates kind of do this themselves, and some do it well and some don't do it so well. But startups and fast growth businesses don't tend to do it at all because they're so focused on hiring people or building the business or whatever it is they hire, and then people just come on. And if it's a new early stage startup, the founders don't really know how to do it. It's not something that they're skilled in. And if it's a fast growth company, there could be up to 5 to 10 people starting a week, and they just simply don't have the time or the power or the energy to do it until they get to a larger scale. And onboarding is possibly the most important part of recruitment. I know people will find that a strange comment, but if you don't onboard well, the chances of that hire being successful are significantly decreased. And an unsuccessful hire is incredibly damaging to the business, and it's incredibly damaging to your budget as well, because it can be very expensive. So I think people need to focus more on onboarding, and I do believe that what I've talked about before in terms of people understanding the story of the business is the most important part of that. It's not where the toilets are, it's not where the coffee machine is. It's really understanding, okay, where has this business come from? What are we doing right now, and where are we going as a collective group? Because people want to belong. We are tribal in our nature, and I think when you join an employer where you spend a lot of your time, whether it be remotely or on site, you want to feel like you belong to that group, and you want to feel like you're working towards a common goal. And I know that you and I have spoken before about impact and how people really need to feel they make an impact, and if they're going to make an impact, they need to know what they're trying to make an impact for.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because as we know, in the current climate, there's a lot of people out of work. There's also a lot of people in their jobs who are fearful of whether or not they're actually going to stay in their job. So if we take it from the perspective called, oh, well, what are the things that I should look for? Because people could find themselves just taking a job for the sake of actually making sure they've got money in their bank account, right? Which is a big risk.
Yep.
But in terms of the sheer volume of people that we're probably going to see going through this process of looking for work, what would be the thing then for you that you'd say would be the best piece of advice for them? What are the things they should look for when asking about that story?
I think they need to find a company that aligns with their values that they can really get on board with. And you're quite right. There are so many people now, and particularly now as we're 2-3 months in, we're really beginning to see the unemployment hit, and our phones are ringing like crazy with candidates, and that is increasing at an exponential rate almost daily. And I think the worst is yet to come. I do think the worst is yet to come.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think there's also a huge amount of people who say to me, "I'll take anything," and I'm really trying to stop them doing that. But I also understand that they've got bills to pay, so it's a really difficult time for a lot of people, and they don't care about the story; they care about the wage packet at the moment, and trying to get people to slow down, really try and pick and choose the opportunities they're going for, and the opportunities are increasing. So there's more chance of them hopefully finding something they're aligned with. But working out what their personal story is, and it's not just, we don't just work on this with clients, we work on this with candidates as well. Where have they come from, what are they doing, and where are they going? Same thing, same process, same 3 stages. And then find a company that has an alignment with that. It's never going to match because they're 2 different entities, but that they should align in some forms, because that's what will keep them there, and that's what will make them work harder, which will make them more successful, which will give them more money, and so forth and so forth.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's slow that down a bit, shall we? Because I do know there in this time, given that people can go away from this and actually start to take that action. I'm somebody who's called through to you, and I'm, Steve, I'll just take anything. Really, I've got to feed my kids, and etc. And your advice is, okay, well, go work on your values and get clear about your story first. So, what are some of the things now that we can suggest that they get off this audio? Go do these particular things. What would you say?
Okay, so you mentioned earlier I'm a bit of a doer, and you're right, and it's less advice. I would say to them, look, don't do that. It's really a bad idea. Don't just take anything. We need to work out your story. Let's do it now. And it doesn't take long. Like, you can do it right then and there on the phone. And it might be a 15-minute conversation, and you might not have a role for them, but it will hopefully give them some clarity. So you kind of start at where they started their career. You look at the resume for a start, and if there's a natural progression, it's usually quite easy. If they've jumped all over the place, then it's also quite easy. It takes a bit longer. So you ask them why they started in that, and then you just say to them what made you move from that role to that role to that role, and hopefully there's not too many of them. And you just look at the history and understand what was driving their decision process from moving to role. Were they trying to achieve something? Was it money? Whatever it was, because that can tell you. I mean, some people's story is literally the pursuit of money. Not that many, less than you think. Other people's story is more about them trying to build a career in a particular industry or get to a particular role. And others are really just looking to constantly challenge themselves and put themselves in uncomfortable situations. 3 very different candidates, but all exist in probably equal amounts. So the history and going through what they've done and getting them to understand, because a lot of them do it subconsciously, getting them to understand why they've done the things they've done will help you choose where they're going to go next. And sometimes they don't even like the story and they don't believe that's them, and then it takes a bit longer. But most people, it's usually quite simple. Once you've worked that out, then you can say, okay, well, now we can kind of look at where you're going to go. The other thing that's important now, if you're talking to people now in this current climate, is they really need to look at their unique selling point, and everybody has them. Right now, there are way too many candidates. And if you apply for every job that you could do, you'll get 90% reject letters. That will create a negativity in your life, and that will make you spiral downwards, and it's just a really bad thing. So you've actually got to say, okay, what have I got that most other people haven't? And then you've got to find roles where they're looking for that. Because at the moment, I think the average response rate on an advert on LinkedIn is about 250 people. They're going to interview maybe 5 to 10. Your chances are not great. So if you haven't got the special thing that they want, you're probably not going to get an interview, and you're just going to get down because you feel, and a lot of people say this to me, I'm getting so many rejections, I feel, I'm feeling like I'm losing my self-worth, and that's a bad place to do. So first thing you've got to do is stop them just applying for everything. Work out their unique selling point, give them some confidence in that. And then I will often say to them, look, every time you see a job, just send it to me and I'll tell you whether I think you should apply for it or not. And then they have to tailor their answers and so forth to make sure they can hopefully get that interview or at least get a call back. Once they start doing that, they'll start to see progress, and then their confidence will start to build again, and they'll become less desperate, because nobody wants to hire a desperate person. It's like dating a desperate person. It's just not something anybody wants to do, right? So they need to get out of that spiral.
Interesting analogy there, Steve.
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago. But
So the unique selling point for them. I do want to talk about that because
Yep.
I know it's very easy, I think, for us as the people who have kind of worked in the industry to say those things. Like they're very straightforward and easy to identify. Unfortunately, though, I do know that when it comes down to like any person that I've actually worked with, when you ask them those questions, it surprises me the degree to which they actually do not have an answer. And
I agree.
I think the longer they're out of the market, too, the more well, the less confidence they then have in that, and it means they start to lose even more focus about being clear about those things. So, for somebody to identify your unique value, what do you go looking for?
It usually comes out in the history when you're going through the history, but not always. So I think you've got to look for a common denominator. I can't say that word. In their previous history. Now, it could be something that they don't necessarily spot, and you're quite right because we do this day in day out. We're far more attuned to it. It could be that they've always worked for small to medium firms, right? So if they go apply for corporates, they're probably not going to get a job. But if people from corporates apply to small to medium firms, they're probably not going to get a job. Could be something simple. It could be that they've always done sales to accountants, and they don't even really realize that, or professional services people. It could be that they've got some sort of degree matched with some sort of experience. So, for example, a lot of people do accounting degrees or law degrees, don't become those people. There's often demand for operations people who have an understanding of that, or salespeople who have an understanding of that. So there's so many different areas. And then the sort of real left field is if you're really struggling because they're hopped all over the place. And unfortunately, at the moment, the demand for people with lots of variety in their background is extremely low. There are periods in my life where it has been high, but right now it's not. You can look at their hobbies. And then you can try and align it with that. So if they
Sorry,
are,
hold on. I can't go past that. I know I'm interrupting.
no,
I'm very good at
I
that.
don't mind that.
No, okay. No, you just said the current situation. They're not looking for a lot of diversity in the background. Is that what you just said? Did
Absolutely, yeah.
I? Okay. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So over the last 10 years, roles have become more and more specialized. You would have seen this. Roles have been broken down into smaller and smaller parts. And if you look at 99% of the roles we get, no one says they want an all-rounder anymore. We used to get a lot of roles like that. Want someone who's had a lot of diverse experience. They don't want that. They want someone who's done the same thing in their last 5 years and they're really, really good at it. It's almost like the contract market used to be very driven by specialists because that's what you're getting them in for. The permanent market has definitely moved that way as well. So if you've done a lot of different things, it's even more difficult for you to find a role. If you have done one thing consistently, and it could be, and if you're in IT, it could be developing a certain language. If you're in sales, it could be selling a particular kind of product like a software. Rather than, you could have sold some other kind of technology, but if you haven't sold software, we don't want to talk to you, which is madness. It could be property, there are all sorts of different things, but everybody wants specialists. They want people who are very narrow in their expertise. And that's just how the market is sitting at the moment. It won't remain like that, but right now that's what it is. And right now they can get that because this market's flooded with people as well.
Interesting. So I do want to challenge that for people in particular, because right now people could go, "Oh God, that kind of excludes me because I've got so much diversity." But I do know that even when you may have diversity, often when people, because I like what you said about having people go back and look at their CV and their resume. It seems like that's a go-to when you're looking at what that story is. So
Absolutely.
um, do you find though, even that people that may have kind of a diverse mix of their career, if they actually look at each of those individual roles, that at some point there is some continuity in the area of expertise that sits through that diversity?
There is always something.
Yes.
And look, I think I'm talking about this from a more general point of view. If you actually look at my client base, there is hope for people who have diverse backgrounds because startups, particularly early stage startups, they want that. So I'm not talking about the ones that have maybe got some venture capital raised 10 million and are going through growth. They want specialists. But the really early ones, maybe there's 3 of them, maybe there's 5, maybe there's 10, they want that diversity because they can't afford 50 people. So they want people who can do lots of different jobs. So there are jobs out there, but they're often not in a place that people might look. And that's often where we look to place them. I actually like really quirky, unusual candidates because I need a lot of those. But the general job market doesn't. So there's a bit of a difference. There's always a home for everybody. And part of that story, and hopefully talking to a recruiter who's not a, I nearly said a rude word, talking to a helpful recruiter can really help them achieve that.
Oh, okay, I'm going to come back to that one, as you well know. But firstly, I do want to just get the message clear for people on that because it's fabulous. That no matter where you sit, I think the thing that I'm taking out of what you're saying, Steve, here is look at yourself, look at what you're great at, find out what you're great at and what's your unique value proposition, and then put that forward because it doesn't, at some point you'll find a fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're struggling with it, talk to people you know. People you know have great insight on you. Not necessarily your friends, because your friends will see you very differently to how you are at work. And that's really important. Don't ask your friends what you should do, the answers will not be helpful. Ask your work colleagues. They've seen you work, or anyone that you've worked with, they will be able to give you really good insight into how you're viewed, what you're good at, what they think you're good at. And it's often quite different to what you
That's a great piece of advice. I mean, how often do you even go back to your previous bosses or colleagues,
no one
right?
does.
And ask them. But I don't know, that whatever the fear is about going to ask whether you think you're going to get bad. I don't know. I've always thought I've often gone back, right, and asked other people. It's always better than what I anticipated. So,
Well,
that
that's
negative
good.
spin.
But definitely, I would definitely recommend colleagues, not necessarily bosses.
Right.
Bosses don't always have the best view on it. Interestingly,
Right.
you'd think they would, but
Right.
they don't. And you know who actually knows better than anybody? If you're in that situation, anyone who's worked underneath you in a team, they will know more about you than anybody else.
Very good. All right, let's go back there. Come on. So recruiters. Do we have a bad name? Well, I'm not a recruiter. I say we as if it's me. But so you've been in recruitment for how long?
I think it's 26 years now.
Yeah, and let's talk about your story for a moment. So you've been in it for 26 years, and you started the Nudge Group in the last 12 months.
Yep.
You took a sabbatical of some sort to kind of reassess where you're at. So in many facts, you did what you are now recommending people do, which is take a good look at what it is that they do and their expertise. Give us a bit of insight on that story for you.
Yeah, look, I did an extreme version. I think when I left my last business and sold my shares, I had not enjoyed the prior 2 years at all. And that was the first time in my life I had not enjoyed my career. I've always bounced into work, couldn't wait to get there, leaped around like a bit of a fool. And the last 2 years I didn't do that, and I didn't want to go in, and I actually didn't enjoy it. I loved the people that I were with, and they kept me going in, but I did not enjoy it at all. So when I left, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going. I thought maybe I'm done, maybe I'm recruited out. Um, so I took that time out, and I looked at all sorts of things. I looked at such random stuff. I looked at a Chinese tourism business. Glad I didn't do that. I looked at a variety of other health, because health always interested me. I looked at a property career. I was in finance once upon a time for about 6 months. I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then over time of self-reflection, I realized that I did want to do it again, and I wanted to do it in this form, as in the nudge, as in working with startups and founders and all that kind of stuff. And but it took months for me to really work that out, and I think it was because I was just woefully unhappy in the last couple of years.
Well, you and many other, in fact, you remind me one of the reasons why I got started on this particular podcast in the first place was because of one of the stats that the Gallup study, 85% of people are unhappy in their job.
Yep.
I think it's 24% are actively disengaged. So I think you wouldn't be alone in that many people are sitting in jobs where they're quite content to just rock up because they're going to get a paycheck and they don't even know where else or what else to do to get themselves started. So firstly, it's a risk that you could just step out and say, look, it's time, I'm just going to go do that work. But let's just, what were some of the things that you did in that time to help you get through the inquiry process?
Okay, so there's a few. 85% is really high.
I know, it is, isn't it?
I mean, I think it's even worse for me. I was a business owner. I mean, if the business owner's unhappy, then
God forbid your poor employees and how they felt.
I don't speak anymore. No, still speak to them all.
That's not true.
So what did I do? So as I said, I went and explored other things, and I read a lot of books. I listened to podcasts, and I think I mentioned this to you before. I learned how to meditate, which was probably one of the biggest changing things I never thought I would ever meditate. My wife had been talking to me about it for years. It never appealed to me. Never had time, and I went and learned.
You're too much like the ever-ready bunny to be able to meditate, aren't you?
Oh no, I'm getting better. I don't meditate for too long. But I went and had one-on-one lessons with a gentleman in Hunter Street, and he taught me how to a real simple way. Because I read some of the books, it was so complicated. I was like, it's not supposed to be hard, is it? So I went. I was recommended to this gentleman, and it was excellent. He taught me how to do it, and that actually helped me. The interesting thing about meditation when you start to meditate is you don't notice a difference, right? That's what I didn't. I didn't notice a difference, but then I noticed a difference if I stopped doing it. So there obviously was a difference. So it wasn't that I started meditating and suddenly I had groundbreaking insight into my life. It wasn't that at all. It was more that I enjoyed doing it, which was good. And when I didn't do it, if I missed it for a couple of days, I really missed it. And I noticed that I felt more, I don't want to use the word, but almost anxious. So it was obviously having some form of effect, or I'd just become addicted to it, one or the other. But and I think without even knowing, that really just helped me. That combined with books and a variety of other things, and just really taking time to be me. You know, I exercised a lot. I spent a lot more time on my own than I had ever done, and I'm not a good time on my own person.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think that some of the things that we've talked about is, the more you seem to take things out of existence, the more you're just left with yourself. But ironically, when you do that, there's a greater degree of peace, but also some clarity that comes in that process.
Totally. And look, I do enjoy time on my own now more than I never did. And I've learned that I actually do enjoy it. I almost feared it. And I think some people do, because they maybe don't even want to think about the things that you end up thinking about. You know, you said you end up with clarity. I think a lot of people inside know a lot of the things they want to know, but they don't want to believe them. So they don't want the quiet time because they don't actually want to be, I guess, find out that they are right about themselves. Does that make sense? Gosh,
Yeah.
that's complicated, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe we should do that again. I don't even know what I said anymore. But yeah,
No,
I think you know
in
what
my
I mean.
experience, when everybody seems to do that, it actually flows really well. So I'm pretty sure it'll be fine. But the other part that I think I want to acknowledge about the approach that you took was the curiosity, that you started to get very curious and just experiment with stuff. And I think you were talking about doing some kind of 30-day experiment on what was out in the market, testing certain things and just to see what was going on.
Oh, you're talking about my demo a day.
Oh, your demo
My
a
demo
day, that's right.
Yeah, I did do a demo a day. So I worked in technology recruitment, but I really was very unaware of what was happening in technology. I knew how to find the people, but again, no time. Running a business, children, schools, all that kind of stuff, no time. So I thought, well, artificial intelligence is really coming on. It's obviously going to impact my industry. I should probably look at that. And I thought, I'm just going to do, because you always get these emails over LinkedIn, we'd love to show you a demo. We'd love to show you a demo. And you just go, no. I thought, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a demo a day of different types of software, particularly artificial intelligence and augmented reality and things that may impact my industry for 30 days. And I did. And as I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, by the end of it, I was really sick of it. And I was amazed at the variation of quality. Some of them were woeful, but some of them were amazing and really opened my mind to what's coming. And it's coming much quicker. Technology is accelerating, as everybody knows. And I just found that really interesting. It was something I'd never done before. And maybe it is doing things that you haven't done before expands your mind. I think they say that, right? If you go and learn to ride a horse, it changes the way you think about things. So I think this was a weird way of riding a horse.
Well, it sounds to me like you were actually just ahead of the curve, because if you think about it now, whilst, I think you said, when you got the opportunity to slow things down and spend time on doing things that you would have intended to do before, you just didn't get the time to do it. I mean, that's kind of what a lot of people are facing right now.
Yeah.
Finally, people are actually able to spend some quality time with their family that when they haven't been able to. And I think some are probably struggling with that one. But,
I think more people have loved that.
Oh, yes.
I know so many people who are probably going to spend more time with their family than they ever did. I think that's the massive positive. And I did spend a lot more time with the kids. I used to pick them up from school, take them to school. I did do the school canteen a couple of times. I don't know if there's any dads who've ever done it out there. I didn't see any when I was doing it, but it's a pretty frightening place. But if you go in there and you just sort of...
What'd you do? Have to make sandwiches?
You make sandwiches, you flirt with all the mums, that kind of stuff. It's not so bad. But it's the kids love it when they see you behind there and you wear a little hairnet on, even though I have no hair, as you know. I had to wear a hairnet and I just couldn't understand why. And can you imagine what I look like? I almost look like, you know what I thought I looked like? You get a matchstick, right? And it's got that red head. That's me sunburnt. Then once you've burnt it off, that's me with a little shower cap on afterwards. And I think that's what I probably looked like.
Oh, oh, you're a good distractor, aren't you? Demo a day. Anyway, demo a day. I'm going to come back to demo a day. Go do your demo a day. Oh my goodness. In fact, demo a day. Go back and look at your CV, look at your story and trajectory. Now, a couple of other things I want to talk about, given what you do, and the journey that you took with that. You've started and sold businesses. So you're an entrepreneur yourself. And the thing I really love about this, Steve, is your business is about servicing entrepreneurs and startups and working with people who are very passionate about that. It's no surprise you've got the energy that you do. But the thing I'm a big believer in walking the talk, right? Go work with somebody who's got demonstrated evidence in what you actually want to accomplish. And I think that's one of the remarkable things about you. You're servicing an industry where not only are you passionate about helping those people, but you've done it yourself. So let's just tell me from your experience what you found to be let's just look firstly at what you found to be one of the most rewarding experiences for you in that journey for yourself.
It's a really interesting question. And the reason it's interesting is because, as you mentioned, Nudge is relatively new. I had forgotten how hard it was at the beginning. I really had. And I think the fact that I have started another one to service this market again, even though I've done it twice before, has because you do. I had both of them for 7-8 years. It's obviously I got that 7-year itch thing, but you really do forget how hard it is and how much there is to do and how difficult it is mentally to keep yourself positive and pushing on. And you're going to have the days where you go, why on earth am I doing this? And I think what I've learned more than anything is I know I can do it. I mean, that probably helps, but the self-doubt is no less or more than it was the first time. Interestingly, in fact, it's probably more because I was younger then. I was 20 something, so you believe you can do anything.
Invincible.
Now I'm 40 something. I'm not sure what I can do anymore, but so I don't know if there's one thing, but I know it's one of the most enjoyable things you can possibly do is having control of your destiny. I think that's the number one thing. I've always worked in sales. I've never had a salary job. I've always had commission in any job that I had before I started a business. So I've always, to some degree, had control over my earnings. But this is another level. I mean, you completely control your life. And once you get comfortable with that, and that's the hardest thing I think for all founders to do, once you're comfortable with controlling your life and believing you can control your life in a positive way, it's the most incredible feeling. I mean, it's total. I see it as freedom. I'm a Sagittarius. I like to travel. I don't like to be held back. And I think entrepreneurship is total freedom. I do believe it. It gives you freedom in your life.
Yeah. And so I dare say, out of having done it twice before, coming into it this time, you would have probably looked at some of the valuable lessons you did learn previously that you brought into this case. What were some of those? Or
you do and you don't. I mean,
right.
No, I'll explain that. I've got 2 children, and
right.
I thought when the second one came along, I thought I've got this all down. Right? I've got this all down, and the second one was totally different. It was like we'd started again. I was so disappointed. Everything I'd learned the first time was utterly useless.
Yes.
And to some degree, starting a business is the same. It's not the same. I think the things that you probably take into it are, you've got some level of understanding of what it takes. You know how hard you have to work, and you know the commitment you have to make, and you know the sacrifices you have to make. I think the reason, my personal belief is why most businesses fail, however the stats, they change all the time, but they're pretty high, is because people didn't realize how much you actually have to work to make it work, what it takes. People think, it's going to be working harder than your job. It's 10 times harder than that. And you have to really want to do it, and you have to love it, and you have to believe it. And I think going in, so your chances are probably higher of success after you've done it once.
Well, it sounds to me actually like you found comfort in the uncertainty. And, I call this the Uncharted leader, because one of the things I certainly found was when I let go of the fact that I thought I had to control everything, I actually found I had more control than ever before. Which is ironic. And I mean, it's the same as what you're saying with the business. There you are, you don't go, it's like having a kid. You kind of think just because you've done it before, you get some kind of level of certainty or control over it, but that's actually the illusion. So in fact, I just wonder whether that's actually, there's more freedom in that, because you've got a belief that you know how to do it, but you've got a belief also that you don't know that you have to have all the answers to figure it all out.
Yeah, look, I think that's a great comment. I agree. I mean, I think you finally understand that there's nothing that you have to do. You can do whatever you want.
Yes.
You have complete control You often hear people in armies or the police force or roles like that. They say, no day is the same, and that's what I love about it. Entrepreneurship is exactly the same thing, except you have a bit more control. Every day is different. But if you don't want to do something, you don't have to do it. You just can find another way. If you don't like the way something's done, don't do it that way. Find another way. And once you understand that, you have more control than you've ever had. When you work for someone else, you don't have any control.
Yeah. It's the illusion of control, right?
Yeah.
So, what is the problem then that you're solving in the business? So, the nudge experience you work with entrepreneurs and help them to solve a particular problem around the people experience. What is that?
So the reason I wanted to start Nudge is that I love working with that group, as I mentioned. But in my view, the two areas that needed recruiters the most, which was startups and accelerated growth companies, couldn't afford recruiters. Startups had no money, and accelerated growth companies couldn't afford it because they were hiring so many people. So that was the problem. We had to work out how to give them, the service that they need more than anybody in a way that they can afford and that de-risks it for them because they've got a lot of risk going on everywhere else. And that actually is more involved. It's not just here's a person, see you later. So it's a much more involved, consultative kind of approach.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you help them with the experience when people come in? Is it just the recruitment area, or are there other areas?
It's completely tailored because every startup is at a different stage. But if you look at it in its purest form, as in the Nudge experience, as we mentioned earlier, it's you find the company, you help them create their story. You then help them build their brand. You then help them find people that align with that story who are also going to keep building their brand.
Oh, you're a matchmaker.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you could create a swipe left, swipe right app called Nudge. I reckon Nudge would work.
Oh, that's not a bad idea. There you go.
I've got a hashtag, give it a nudge. That would work.
That would work. There you go.
I don't.
New tech platform for the Nudge experience.
There's got to be some sort of legislation that would make that illegal somehow. But I think around privacy. But and yes, we do. We help them onboard them. We help them with whatever they need. We help them build the business. We help them structure it correctly. We help them with whatever they need. That's the whole point. We're there. I think if you read my website, I've just changed the front cover. I think it says, if you grow, we grow.
Right.
And that's generally what we're trying to do. We're trying to work with less people and literally grow with them and piggyback off each other's success.
Very good. And the current market, what are you finding? Because how long you've been, the pandemic's happened and, you're talking about the fact that it's starting to grow. Is that what's going on?
You grow, we grow is definitely the tagline right now.
You're growing so much that you're working till 2 o'clock in the morning.
I know, and that's why I'm a little low on energy today.
Yes.
Look, the growth in the last 2 weeks has been exponential. It's insane. We've gone from very cautious hiring to the gay abandon, if you like. I mean, literally the amount of roles coming through now is exceeding where we were prior to anything COVID, and it was crazy then. And the interesting thing is now there's lots of candidates as well, so it's a great time for us. It doesn't usually last that long, but right now it's a very good time for us. So it's only in the startup area and the VC area though, and I think there's a reason for that. And it's also state driven, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you think about the companies that we're recruiting for, they're usually funded and they're usually charging towards a revenue target, not a profit target. So they've got funding for 2 years, and where they're going to get their next round of funding is by hitting a certain growth in revenue. It doesn't actually matter how much money they make. In fact, they don't usually make any. So to do that, they have to grow with your people. That's the only way they're going to do that is to grow in technology or people. So they're hiring because that's how they've got to go forwards. Whereas if you look at corporates, they're profit driven. Shareholder companies or even private companies are driven by profit, and they're still cutting, and there's still going to be more redundancies coming in that space. So where I'm working, it's all about timing, is literally exploding. But I think the general market is probably going the other way, which is giving some balance to a degree. And I think private equity firms probably doing the same thing to a degree. I mean, they're more profit driven, obviously, but they're investing because they see the opportunity of good talent on the market. So it's a bit of what's the word they always used to use? Two-speed, the old two-speed economy.
Oh, yes, yes.
It's kind of a little bit like that in terms of recruitment. And then I mentioned the state thing, and this is fascinating. So as we all know, our premiers are doing a variety of different things that they feel are right.
Yes.
Most of the work we do is Sydney, Melbourne. We do some in Brisbane, but it's mainly Sydney, Melbourne. And Melbourne is nowhere near as positive as Sydney. Sydney is exploding, and our work's pretty 50-50. Melbourne, nothing. And I put that down to the restrictions being lifted. As restrictions have lifted, people have started hiring again. I don't think they think that's why they're doing it. I think it's a mental thing. I think people are coming out of restrictions and they're feeling more positive about everything. And they're going, you know what, maybe we should hire that person. Whereas 2 weeks ago when they weren't allowed out, they were like, there's no way we're hiring anyone.
Yes.
So Melbourne, I'm thinking in a couple of weeks, and maybe I should come back in a couple of weeks and tell you, but we'll hopefully start to hire as well. But there's definitely been, I find that human behaviour, particularly subconscious human behaviour, is always really interesting.
Yes. Well, I think we could even take it back to our own behaviours in the home, right? About what we're putting our money towards and what we're choosing to spend and how much we spend, and getting a little bit more confident about those. We've just started some renovations, for example. It's like, okay, it's time to start putting some more money back into the house and start doing those things. But, probably no different then.
No, it was all driven by the same thing. But I don't think people go, oh, restrictions of this, let's hire. I think it's just a product of that.
So it sounds like Queensland might be behind the eight ball on this one then. Aren't they kind
of?
Aren't they still closing down for some time?
I don't know if I'm going to comment on Queensland. I think I might say something that would offend half of your viewers.
I find I'm okay to say that because I've spent a number of years living in Queensland. So I've got family living in Queensland. I'm not slamming Queenslanders.
Can't see them now, though, can you? Can't get in. But
I can't wait for it to lift. Let me tell you.
Look, the Queensland's still ticking over. There's still things happening in Queensland, but we don't do enough work there to really be able to gauge that. Very cautious answer.
Well, yes, I can get that. Well, in fact, I think what we should do is just make sure people go to visit the Nudge Experience to reach out and see what the opportunities are, considering you seem to be getting quite a few.
Yes, I'm really excited by it, actually, I've got to say, because there's a lot of really cool businesses that have, we've won a lot of new business during COVID, interestingly. And there's a lot of really cool businesses doing some really cool things. And that's another thing I like. It's not just the founders. The businesses are just far cooler than recruiting for Combank, right? It's just more interesting.
Okay. Well, then to complete on our chat today, because we could always, you and I, talk forever, is it attract a certain kind of person? Like, given where you're putting people, I imagine it'd be quite a high demand area in terms of, I don't know, is there a certain kind of person that seems to be more attracted to the environment where you're recruiting for?
I think at the moment, everyone's attracted to it, but there's a certain type of person that will be successful and there's a certain type of person that won't. And there's a lot of people who won't be successful who want to. And a big part of what we do is trying to educate candidates on what it's going to be like. And is this really the right thing for you? Yes, you want to work for a startup. Everybody wants to work for a startup.
Yeah.
But do you really understand what that means? And
what does that mean?
Well, I think there's so many different personality types. Working for a startup, you have to be able to cope with constant change. You have to be able to cope with being asked to do things that are nothing close to your job description. You have to be willing to probably work longer hours than you would normally at the drop of a hat. It's very, very fluid. And a lot of people don't like fluid. They like structure. If you like structure, it is the worst place in the world and you will not enjoy it and you'll leave. And you see that a lot. The dropout rate in startups is a lot higher because people just don't understand. And we try to educate and we try to, weed out the ones that we know aren't going to work, but you're never going to get that right. So I think if you are thinking about going to work for a startup or an accelerated growth company where your role might change 4 times in a year, think about how you're going to react to that. And if you're excited by it, then great. If you're indifferent about it, maybe think again. If you like structure, don't go near it.
Okay, fabulous takeout today, Steve. I think the takeout, certainly from everything that we've talked about today, clearly you're in the game of making sure people end up in jobs and that people get people into jobs where they're really satisfied and thriving. And out of everything that you've shared, what I'm hearing for people is, don't just focus on what you think you want. Actually start to think about what you don't want. And by looking at your strengths and capabilities and skills, and rather than try and think you've got to do it all and be all, no, hone in specifically on what is really going to make the difference. So I think stop looking at doing everything. Start looking at what you take out of existence, slow down, and only apply for the things that you actually really do think are going to be the thing that's going to make you thrive.
Absolutely. And I would really, really recommend everyone, if there's one thing you do, it's talk to other people about what they think you're good at.
Of course, that was
That's probably the most important thing that no one does.
Yeah, good. Go do it, people. Thanks for your time, Steve.
Thank you.